All right, so today is the day. We're jumping into the Corvette. We're gonna get this thing took apart. The season is gonna sneak up on me like it always does. Every time I have plans for something, I always wait to the last minute and then time's over. So as of right now, I got about 4 months until first practice sessions come out and I get to test the car with the new setup. So I'm gonna jump into this thing, start nibbling at it, and only thing that sucks is this lift. I'm gonna try to approach this at a way where I can still get the car out and work on it, and I can't have it on this lift tore down for an extended period of time because I use this shop for pretty much my customers and stuff like that, and my employees need somewhere to work and they don't want to use floor jacks. So pretty much I'm gonna get this thing, I'm gonna probably approach it with take the diff out, transmission, torque tube, let the car down, like pretty much get the subframe back in the rear, get it rolling, and then just pull the motor out the top like normal. I was gonna drop the subframes, both of them, and just drop it all as an assembly, which is what I would like to do, but then I wouldn't be able to leave it on the lift. So I'm just gonna approach it at a way where I can still work on the car, get it put over in my bay, and I can still do like the ABS delete, just pretty much chisel away a little at a time. I got 4 months. I don't want it to sneak up on me. So we're gonna get this thing on the lift, start taking the trans and diff out, get the exhaust off, and start, like I said, chiseling away. Let's get it. So a little backstory on the Corvette, if you haven't watched any of my other videos. Pretty much when I first started drifting, almost exactly a year ago, I had a Mustang. I'd done about 4 to 5 events in it, and I was getting comfortable with it. And this thing popped up for $5,700. And I was like, I gotta have it. Like, Corvettes are starting to get popular. This was almost 9 months ago when I got this car. So pretty much I seen that these cars were getting popular, and I'm like, all right, it already comes LS swap. What more could you want? And besides the fact that they're pretty hard to work on normally, but I've messed with a bunch of these, pulled lots of transmissions. Like, these cars I love working on these cars. One thing I really hate is where they put the ABS module, doing power steering. Pretty much this car hasn't really had power steering since I had it. So pretty much any video you've seen me driving this car is without power steering. It's very tight. It works under throttle a little bit. Like it's there to assist just a little bit. But the ABS module, I'm deleting that. I'm getting rid of that because right now I have the ABS disabled and it makes the rear brakes more biased. So when I'm trying to left foot brake, instead of like using the front to keep the car sideways, it's pretty much putting rear brakes on more than the front. So it doesn't really work that great. So that's one thing I'm gonna be doing. I'm gonna be deleting that. I'm probably gonna go with a turn 1 power steering pump and getting them to rebuild the rack and pinion. Let me see what else. We're getting an ls3. That's 221,000 miles on that motor, and that thing has been solid all season. So that is gonna be in a future project. We'll be putting that up. And I gotta thank my boys at Drift HQ for pretty much helping me set this thing up whenever I first got it. Helping me with shock settings and stuff. I mean, this car is, the 2 people that I've let drive this car, maybe 3, have said this car is unbelievable. But this car has gave me a lot of confidence in drifting. I absolutely love it. Like, I'm so hooked, and I really want to compete next year. So that's the whole reason of taking this thing apart. Ever since I've got it, high RPMs for extended period of time, like on a bank, the clutch pedal would just sink to the floor and the car would just neutral out. I don't know, it's gotta be something to do with centrifugal force, making the forks on the clutch pressure plate like open up. So I've had a monster clutch and flywheel for about 5-6 months now. I got it as soon as I got the car, and I've been waiting for a good point to take it apart and put it in. So I think now having an ls3, I'm gonna do a cam, might do a set of PRC heads, pretty much get this thing close to 500 wheel horsepower with that clutch. And I'm thinking about doing diff brace and all that, which the C5 or the C6, the 05 C6 had the weakest diff ever. There's a lot of people that say the C5 diffs are a lot stronger than the C6. So I've been lucky with that, which I don't do a lot of clutch kicking. I'm thinking about installing a clutch delay valve also, just to kind of soften the blow. But I want to get the torque tube and everything out and take it apart and probably go ahead and rebuild it Even though I don't have any noise or anything, I just don't want that thing to explode. Like, I want to get this thing dialed. Like, I was able to leave this thing on the trailer pretty much all season, last season, and not touch it. Like, I never done anything to it. Normally, when I would get ready to leave a drift event, I'd go ahead and have the guys put new tires on it when I was there, and it was ready for the next event. Never unloaded off the trailer. So these are very, very reliable drift cars. And if you've been on the fence about getting one, just do it. So let's get this thing on the lift, get it took apart. All right, so I guess I'm gonna start with getting the exhaust off. I'm so excited to see what a cammed ls3 is gonna sound like with this Corsa Sport exhaust. So we're gonna get the exhaust off. It's got a nice X pipe. I kind of want to do new headers. I mean, these were coated headers. They're kind of looking rough. Kind of small tubes. I don't know, we'll see if it's in the budget. I might do new headers. These have the spot for the EGR, but I'll pretty much just deleted all that and just welded them up. So it would be nice to have new headers. That's not bad. I washed the transmission the last event. It was pretty oily. But for 220,000 miles, motor's not terribly dirty. Granted, I did wash it every single event. Like, my worst fear was a fire. When I first got this car, I went out and done a couple of donuts and it smelled like the car was on fire. Pretty much the oil and everything was coated with oil where it had been leaking for so long. Rear main seal has a small leak. So before every event, I would put it on my trailer and I would pretty much pressure wash it really good. Kept it clean. So let's get these exhaust bolts sprayed and get the thing soaking and start unbolting some stuff. All right, so I am having a little bit of difficulty getting this header out, considering I have that extension with the catalytic converter still on it. It's not allowing me to twist it the way it needs to be twisted. So I guess I'm gonna go down underneath and try to take the clutch line loose because that's holding it from coming off the bottom. Took the steering shaft out. That didn't give me no room. Like, it's super close. If the brake booster was moved, it would be out. But I really don't want to take that loose. So I'm gonna go underneath and see if I can take something loose there and get it out the bottom. So as you can see, this is what I'm working with. This big, long exhaust. So right up here where the clutch line is, the back of the flange kind of catches on it. So I'm gonna try to get that out of the way. It's zip tied up to the brake lines. And I think I'll be able to just get it to drop down. Having the bat wing oil pan kind of makes it a pain. I honestly wanted to change the pan, but people say they work really good for drifting because of the way it's designed. But I want to do a C6 pan and probably do C6 headers to make it way easier to work on. One thing I do like about the C5s, other than like a C6, is the bottom of the bell housing is removable. So you can honestly change the clutch and flywheel in these cars by just pulling the torque tube back a little bit. You don't have to pull it completely out. So I do like that design. Pretty much take all your torque tube bolts out, slide it out of the clutch disc, drop this bottom plate. You don't have to take the bell housing off the back of the motor or anything. So that's pretty sweet. All right, so we're getting ready to pull the subframe. And instead of doing it the traditional way, people do it by taking the top control arm bolts out and taking your pretty much your shock loose up here. This thing having coilovers, this back bolt is hard to see. It's really hard to get to. Like from here, it looks like you can get it, but basically to get that one, you have to take the shock loose here, drop this down, and there's a pivot ball up here. Swing it out of the way so you can get a socket on it. A lot of people usually put an Allen-headed bolt there, but when I put these in, they went in really easy by just swiveling this out of the way. So to do that, I have to take control arm, the tie rod in loose and drop down, better pick this up and get it over. But to get that down, it hits the bleeder screw, and I'm trying to stop a mess. So what I'm gonna actually do is I'm just gonna take the shocks loose at the bottom and leave the shock on the car. I'm gonna leave the knuckle on the car. I'm just gonna take the axle nut loose here, and pretty much I'm gonna just take the control arm off and let it hang with the knuckle. That way the subframe itself can just fall out. So that's gonna entail me taking tie rod loose here. Have a big swivel that gets right on that. Perfect. I can take them loose there, swivel it out of the way, get the shock out of the way, and drop the lower control arms, and subframe's coming out. So that's what we're doing now. So doing it that way actually worked really well. Like, it would have been easy to do it the other way because you can drop the diff, axles, everything together. But when you start factoring in coilovers, dual caliber setup, stuff like that, you got to take into account. Then your parking brake, it's a lot harder to deal with. So doing it this way actually worked out good. So now all I got to do is take my axle nuts off the end of the hub, and I'll be able to pull the hub back out of the axles and they'll just hang. So this worked out really well. This is gonna be my go-to way of doing it now. Maybe even on a stock car, just the fact that you don't have to mess with the brake lines. As far as this goes, they do go under the axle here, but I'm gonna be changing all this. I'm not gonna just cut it out of there yet because you never know what happens, plans change, but it's in the plans to do something with these rear lines and the front, delete ABS. I wish GM would have just developed these lines to come up over the axle and down instead of running them. They're already up there. I don't understand it, why they wanted to come back here and then go under the axle and then back up. I'll never know. If it was me, I would have come straight over to there. I don't know why they decided to do this. So anytime you take a transmission of a Corvette, you had to break the bulkheads loose up there and lose your brake fluid. So I guess now I'm gonna get the axles out and drop the transmission. All right, we got it out. I was able to actually just pull the brake lines back enough to get it to clear. Normally when I pull these, the axles come down with the transmission, but me doing it the way I did it because of the dual caliber setup, it actually allowed brake lines to be perfectly cleared. I just I bent them just a little bit to pull them back, but other than that, they're sweet. But we got it out. It's pretty filthy on top. You can tell I washed the bottom. Like I said, I was always scared of fire. Fire is my worst fear. So I always kept it clean. As you can see, like it's dry. I'm pretty sure the clutch is toast. Even though it was working good, what I'm thinking happens is at around 6,200 RPM. If I hold it there for say 5-6 seconds, I feel like the centrifugal force is enough to make these fingers open up, and it would just make the clutch pedal go to the floor, because instead of me pushing the clutch to make the forks open, it was actually centrifugal force. That's the only thing I can think of. As long as I kept it under $6,000, it was perfect. But this thing, the rear main seal was looking pretty good on this car. The bottom cover was containing it pretty well. Like, it's so stupid how GM designed this bleeder. Like, me flushing the brake fluid seemed to help a little bit. At least in the back of my head it did. But you cannot get to this bleeder. Like, literally, this is under the, pretty much the header runs here. Your torque tube cover is in the way. Like, you cannot get to this bleeder. To bleed the clutch, you literally have to pull the exhaust off, pull the torque tube cover off to be able to get to that. Even then, it's still a pain. So I got a remote bleeder for it. We're gonna do a brand new GM slave cylinder. Got the monster clutch and flywheel, the quick disconnect. I got a new Tick Performance master cylinder for the clutch. There's so many people that talk crap about it and say don't use it. So I may end up just getting a stock GM one, because I don't want a heavy clutch pedal. I mean, if your clutch kicking, you want to be able to just give it a kick and not have to force it too hard. So I guess I'm gonna get this thing on the ground, get a torque tube unattached. I might just do it right here on the stand to make it a little easier. But there's a little bit of play in there. I think my weebles, I guess they call them, is probably going out. I could feel a little bit of play in it. And that's not play coming from the tube to the transmission. Sounds like it's like right in the center of the torque tube, or more or less right around this area. But there's like these big rubber weebles, almost like a BMW, and you have these like big Torx bolts. And I've seen the weebles go out and actually still work fine, but the bolts just butt up to each other, and normally you start tearing stuff up when it gets that far. I'm probably gonna replace the shifter too, because I hate the shifter in this car. It's very clunky and hard to get in reverse, hard to get in first gear. So when you're like banging gears, and I need to be able to go to third, I've recently started using third gear drifting, and it makes it very hard to shift when the shifter is so stiff. I've done the anti-venom mod where you put a washer on this thing for the detent. That didn't do nothing. I'm taking the washer back off and just gonna get a good shifter for it. Also, in a later video, I'm going to be taking the diff apart, doing the ECS, I think it is, lockout kit for the rear diff to get rid of the clutches. So I'll do a whole video on that when I take the diff off and do that. But we got a 342 gear. I figured we did. I'd like to have a 373, but third gear is pretty long in this car. All right, let's get back to work. All right, torque tube is off. Not sure what all that is. Pretty sure the rear bearing is bad. It's just like, yeah, I'm not sure. Doesn't look good. It's been slinging some rusty, nasty looking stuff around inside of there. So I'm definitely gonna be tearing the torque tube apart and probably rebuilding it. Could be having failures like that. That would destroy a season. Other than that, transmission looks pretty decent. So yeah, like even like right now, I can turn that super easy. So the shifter box mounted right there on the torque tube is just really, really hard. Like, it's got some very tough springs in it. I could probably soften them up. I'd just rather get a new shifter. Oh, that's sweet. Transmission sounds sweet when I spin it. So I'm gonna get somebody up here to probably help me get this off, because this thing is super heavy. I don't think I'm gonna do it on my own. Let me just give this thing a spin. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be play up and down. Never really messed with a torque tube. But there's a good bit of play up and down, which may be normal, but there's nice bearings on the end of each part of the shaft, so I honestly feel like it might be bad. Oh, that thing sounds terrible. Yeah, that thing sounds bad. So as you've seen, I don't have anybody here to help me. So I use the 4-post like I've done multiple times. Usually when I'm here by myself and I got it on a transmission jack, I can get the lift up high enough to just slide it right off. So that worked good. I'll have somebody help me get that somewhere where I can get it washed later. And I'm gonna get the subframe back in now. That thing's super light. I'm gonna get that back in, get the axles just kind of sitting on top of it to where they can just rotate. Because I didn't want to pull the axles out this way. Is the reason I did it this way. I'm gonna be rolling the car around. I don't want the bearings to come apart. So yeah, glad I'm taking this thing apart because that could have been bad. Like I've seen times where it just destroys the whole tube and you have to buy a new one. So we're gonna get this car pretty dialed for next year. I would love to do something with the fuel system also. I have no idea. I don't know if the filter's ever been changed. Like I don't want to have no troubles next year. That's one thing I hate, is having to do trackside repairs or trying to troubleshoot. I'd rather get it all going now, fixed. And even though I don't have a problem with the fuel system, I think making more power, I need to go ahead and just upgrade the fuel pump. And I might just go ahead and run AN lines or see what they offer for like aftermarket drop-in pumps. Because I know it's got two. It's got another sending unit on this side. It's got a saddle tank. It's got this big rubber hose that kind of crosses over for both. So I got to address that crap. As you can see, my heat shields from the beginning of the season lasted pretty good. At Piedmont on the Boss track, I went out there my first try and I was hitting rev limiter a lot and I smelled fiberglass burning. And I come back, well, when I got it home, I got to look and I could see the fiber. This is all fiberglass. I could see where it went, like I could see strands like hair hanging out, and you can see where it was getting ready to take off and just burn. That would have been very bad. So I took and made these little heat shields out of car tags. So that seemed to work pretty good for last year. So I'm not even gonna touch it. I'm gonna leave it. So I guess for right now, I'm gonna go ahead and get the subframe in, get the car on the ground and start pulling the motor out. I mean, we're almost done. Like I've been working on it for probably about 2 hours and we're pretty much done. I just gotta get the motor out and that's gonna be super simple. So let's get this subframe in. All right, so I got the bell housing flywheel off to help get the motor out a little simpler. And got some hot spots. This thing is absolutely toast. Like, I don't understand how it was still working so good. Dang. Like, there's no lines in it anymore. Like, it got so hot that it's starting to come apart. So yeah, I don't know how that was still grabbing and drifting so good, but it was. Reliability. But look at this mess. Thing was leaking a little worse than I thought it was. Like as far as looking at the clutch, like every bolt, like I don't even know if it's ever been apart. I don't know if this is a factory clutch and flywheel or not. Like every holder was like in the exact same spot. Like normally when people take cars apart, things don't go back 100%. I'm not saying that they don't all the time, but for the most part, something this hard to get out, normally you'll see something left loose as far as like a clip holding a harness. None of that. This thing was like stock. Getting ready to let it down, get it, the motor pulled out, get everything unhooked from it, and we'll be done for today. We'll get this thing on the ground, get it outside, and start trying to get parts coming for it. It is out. Wasn't too bad. My wife come up here and grabbed me and we went and ate lunch, and it got a little late on us. But I got that out. Transmission's just hanging out over there. The last few events I've had a bearing noise in one of these pulleys, and I finally found it. I knew it was coming out, so I never really worried about it. But I'm gonna send this pump off to Turn 1 Performance, I think that's the name of it, and get them to rebuild it along with the rack. Guess in the coming days I'll get things cleaned up, everything, get it organized, get it ready to go back together, get the transmission clean, get the diff pretty much locked out. But I guess that's gonna be it for this one. I appreciate you watching. Until the next one, we see you then.